morning. I call to order the Lake Havasu City Council Budget Work Session on Thursday, May 21st, 2020 at 9 a.m. In-person attendance is suspended for this meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting will be held through technological means. Public participation in this meeting is encouraged. Viewed live on Channel 4, or you can view the meeting live at lhcaz.gov/TV, or you can call in and listen on a teleconference line by dialing 1-888-240-2560. Again, 1-888-240-2560. And the meeting ID is 938-418-435. Citizens can also submit written comments for the call to public and public hearing items by emailing the city clerk at cityclerk@lhcaz.gov. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if the city clerk would like to call the roll.
Councilmember Jenny Koch.
Here.
Councilmember Gordon Grote.
Present.
Councilmember Michelle Lynn.
Here.
Councilmember Donna McCoy.
Here.
Councilmember Jim Dolan.
Currently present for your budgetary needs.
Vice Mayor David Lane.
Not come across.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Mayor Kalshihi.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is the call to the public. This is where citizens have the opportunity to address the city council on any matter within the jurisdiction of Lake Havasu City. Because this in-person attendance is suspended, we did ask citizens to email the city clerk at cityclerk@lhcaz.gov prior to the meeting. We did receive one item for call to the public. If the clerk would please read that into the record.
Thank you. This email was received on Wednesday, May 20th, 2020 at 3:08 p.m. It reads, "Good morning, Mayor, City Council, City staff, and citizens. The Lake Havasu Police Officers Association has recently had the opportunity to review the proposed budget for fiscal year 2020-21. Within the budget is the proposed implementation of the positional analysis, which hopefully is going to be discussed in more detail today. Although our association has not seen any results of the positional analysis, it is our hope that the analysis fairly and accurately depicts a new prevailing wage for police officer at the Lake Havasu City Police Department. With that being said, our association is very concerned with what looks like a proposal to implement the results of the positional analysis as a Plan B expenditure with a possible implementation in January of 2021. As an association, we cannot, in good conscience, accept this proposal without expressing our deep concern for what is being proposed. It is no secret that the police department continues to lose officers at a high rate, with several leaving just in this last budget year. We want to express again the time, money, and effort it takes to certify just one officer to solo status to patrol the streets of Lake Havasu City. Often, the best cost-saving measure a department can make is to retain the officers it currently has. It is not a simple process or decision, as a seasoned officer, to leave one police department for another. Yet we continue to see officers leaving LHCPD, including 2 officers with over 13 years of experience just in the last few months. Unfortunately, the lack of comparable wages and benefits for police officers in Lake Havasu City has made this decision for many much easier than it should be. Not a surprise, but a quick glance of the hourly salaries by our association with the 10 new comparable cities shows that Lake Havasu City police officers are the lowest, and it is not even close. Not only is the loss of experienced officers leaving LHCPD challenging to the overall demographics of the department, but as the lowest paying agency, we continue to have difficulty in hiring replacements. New applicants, if and when hired, will take close to a year to replace what we once already had. I am sure today, much like in the CIP budget work session, we will hear a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic and how we find ourselves under the circumstances. Our association does not doubt and completely understands there may be some unknown circumstances in the future. Although the circumstances of tomorrow are always unknown, it seems that as a city, we routinely find ourselves under the circumstances. What is of interest is how every other city in the state of Arizona has lived through the same economic downturns, budget constraints, expenditure limitations, pandemics, etc. But they still have somehow managed to compensate their police officers. This COVID-19 pandemic has not reduced the need for police officers. The COVID-19 pandemic has not reduced rising mortgage, rent costs for officers, insurance, and utilities, to give just a few examples. In reading newspaper articles, speaking with citizens across different industries, and observing the ongoing busy activity within the city, one might even question the real level of impact the pandemic is even having on the local economy. Circumstances aside, we unfortunately again this year seem to be finding ourselves in the same position that we have found ourselves in past years. A clear need to compensate police officers at a prevailing wage, and a new reason why it is supposedly can't be done. Even the city decides to remain cautious moving forward into next year's budget. The real question is why the positional analysis of all things has been chosen to be a Plan B expenditure. In January of 2019, our association presented a proposal, expressed our concerns, and even provided a partial remedy to bring equality to all officers on the department due to the ongoing issue of the senior police officer pay ban still being frozen after 10 years. Over the last 17 months, we have seen and felt the ramification of the choice to do nothing. We have remained patient once again throughout this budget year, being led to believe that this positional analysis was Plan A. Ralph Waldo Emerson once quoted, "Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you are saying." As an association, we believe that city staff and city council supports the officers of this city, which has verbally been expressed many times year after year. However, seeing this positional analysis implementation now as Plan B is extremely discouraging, to say the least. This action speaks so loud that we can no longer hear a word being said. Our hope is that this Plan B proposal is seriously reconsidered. At this time, it seems we are averaging a loss of 1 officer a month. So what is the positional ramification of waiting another 6 months? That is the question that has to be asked on top of the 10 years of reasons why the senior police officer pay ban has never been reinstated, or why specialty assignment pay incentives have never been reinstated, and why our officers year after year find themselves being led to believe this is the year that something is going to be done, only to just be disappointed once again. We thank you for your time and consideration. Submitted by Michael Fuller, President, Lake Havasu Police Officers Association.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We have no other call to the public. So we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the budget overview, presentation, discussion, and potential direction to staff on the budget for fiscal year 2019-20, year-end estimates, fiscal year 2020-21 annual budget, and the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Yeah, good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Today we are talking about the operating budget for the fiscal year 2021. Last budget session, we talked about the CIP, or the capital improvement plan portion of the budget. Those, as a reminder, those are projects that are one-time funding. They're used for one-time projects. And today we'll hear from Jill Olson and Sean Arula as well. And we'll be talking about the operating budget, and we'll also be touching on the positional analysis with some detail. This continues to be one of these scenarios that we talked about previously when it comes down to the budget. We are putting together a plan through the budget process that allows for all scenarios to happen, the good, the bad, as well as the ugly. You'll see in the budget here that we're projecting up to a 20% decrease in sales tax projections, which equates to between $7 and $10 million. A hit to the city's funding, but we're also talking about, you'll see in one of Jill's slides here in a little bit, an allocation of $10 million, not in real money, but an allocation of $10 million that if we receive assistance coming from the federal government, from Governor Ducey's office, through different grants that we can acquire, or if we receive an increase in revenues to the city over the next few months, that we're in a position to provide services and spend those dollars and do some good things for our citizens. So all scenarios are included. So we're talking about a reduction in services and a reduction potentially, and I think that's a very, very unlikely, but a reduction in force. But we're also talking about the ability for increases, for raises, for implementation of the projects that are listed, including hopefully all of the Plan B projects. We heard from call to the public from the Police Officers Association and their need for the implementation of positional analysis. And again, we'll hear from Sean here in a minute and provide some details to a certain extent. But these are things that we need to be very certain of in how we implement personnel cost. So we have a one-time cost that Sean will discuss. We even have a breakdown by different departments. But we also have an ongoing incremental compounded cost to the city on a year-to-year basis. We have to be 100% sure that what we do with the decisions, again, today is about the operating budget, the ongoing expenses for the city, that we're able to sustain those for future years. The last thing we want to do is introduce something new and be forced to take it away a short time period later. So again, this budget that'll be presented will include all scenarios. This is a plan, and we'll talk about the funding for different projects. We're able to go into some detail with some of the projects, so please engage us, council, mayor. Please engage staff on some questions about certain projects, but also be aware that we'll come back at a later time in the budget year, like we always do with every council agenda, to discuss some of these big projects and get approval from council on contracts and purchases and all those types of things. Today, we're putting together a plan on the potential of being able to purchase or implement services or projects, those types of things. But again, we'll have many more details at a later time. You'll see also in Jill's presentation, we have a number of requests that come in from the different departments through Jill's office, through my office. We have X amount of dollars, a finite amount of dollars within the city. So a lot of decisions are being made on what is a priority, and that's really what a budget document is. It's a plan that includes a list of priorities for the city based on the available resources. From the city's perspective, we worked very, very hard in the last few years to put ourselves in a position where the ongoing revenues on an annual basis equal the ongoing expenditures on an ongoing basis. We cannot rely on dipping into our reserves to fund the budget. And so we are very aware of that. And the budget that is being proposed to council takes that into consideration. And some more details on that here shortly. Those needs that were requested by the different departments were a little over $11 million. So you're going to see in here some of the projects and requests that made the budget. You're going to see some projects and requests that made the Plan B, and then you're going to see another $11 million worth of projects that aren't part of this budget process. These dollars represent needs within the departments. So keep that in mind in terms of we're not able to fulfill every need that came through, and this budget document reflects that. Again, we had the ability to approve requests, the ability to identify Plan B projects, and then the unfortunate third scenario is to deny those requests coming in. So With that, we continue to do some cost saving measures in this year's budget. There's some strategic hiring freezes and some reduction in costs that have been implemented, and we continue to do our best to use the city taxpayer dollar wisely, and that will continue into next fiscal year, into this budget year. With that, I'd like to thank all the department heads. I'd like to thank Jill, Angie, and all the support staff up and down throughout the organization for all the hard work. This is a process that starts back in November, December, and all that hard work and effort leads to this work session. So with that, I will pass the presentation over to Jill and take it away, please, Jill.
Thank you. Good morning. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see the beginning of the presentation.
It's good.
As you've seen in prior meetings, this first half is a review of the budget process in general. And then below, you'll see the budget materials for this meeting, specific to this workshop, is the operating budget book. This goes hand in hand with the CIP book, and the summaries that you find in this book actually include the CIP numbers as well. So we'll talk a little bit about financial projections, some of which we did during our last CIP workshop, including the revenue highlights. We'll look at the expenditure highlights and the department budgets. You should have received a revised budget book. The only pages that changed in your revised budget book compared to the one handed out on Friday is the section for the FTE count on pages 27 to 31. So there was some reorganization movements between departments and a couple of other minor items in there that had to be corrected. So we got those corrected, and you'll see that the net difference is only 1 to 2 positions. But your revised budget document does have the updated, correct FTE counts. One thing I did want to mention also, as far as the department budgets, when you look back in that section of the budget book under departmental budgets, we tried to include a box at the bottom that we call the budget variances, so that we have an explanation for anyone who's reviewing those for any differences that you might see between last fiscal year and this fiscal year. So hopefully that is helpful in understanding what the differences are from year to year for those budgets. Council will adopt the tentative budget on June 9th, and then the final budget will be before council on June 23rd for adoption. So today we'll look at the expenditure budgets, the departmental budgets. We will look at those just as in total. We'll look at the next steps, and then we'll be open to questions. For expenditures in the personnel section, we have budgeted overall for an average increase of about 2% of 2% of the prior budget as an increase for the 2021 budget. We've also included an attrition savings vacancy factor of approximately 2%. So those are reflected in the numbers as well. These numbers assume that employee wage increases continue on their evaluation date based upon the current system. And then we also included a healthcare increase of 2.5%. And then we did receive the pension rates from the state for ASRS. The rates are increasing from 12.1 to 12.2. And then you can see for PSPRS, police rates have increased from 50.4 to 56.4. And fire rates increasing from 48.8 to 51.5. So those are increases that have also been included in the budget. Under a Plan B scenario, we do show new full-time budget positions there of 3, one for the fire department, a new battalion commander. But it's important to note that this battalion commander was added and 2 other current authorized positions were not funded in order to cover that increase for the battalion commander. In administrative services, there's the addition of a programmer analyst. In development services, we're actually funding the position of zoning administrator for this next fiscal year. Then, as Mr. Knudsen referenced in the introduction, we do have Plan B scenario for implementing the position analysis results. It's been estimated it's going to cost about $600,000 for all funds for this first year, which would only be half a year. For 21-22, the additional cost is going to be approximately $2.1 million, and that would increase exponentially due to the compounding of the increases every year. That's assuming a 4% average evaluation increase. So,
Yeah, Jill, you said 2.1 million? Did you mean 1.2 million?
well,
Or is-
no,
Explain.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jess. Listen to what I mean, not what I say, right? So I'm sorry with that. Yeah, 1.2 million. And then that would compound each year. So next, Sean Arula is going to cover the position analysis process and give you an update on that.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Good morning, Mayor and members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to update you on the positional analysis and the progress that has occurred since the council planning session that took place earlier this year. Shortly after that meeting, Baker Tilly, which is our consultant for the positional analysis, provided the city with a project summary that included the specifics of the proposed pay scale and placement of positions within that scale. Executive staff, along with the consultant, analyzed the data in detail and finalized the grouping of job families and placement within the proposed structure. Based on that information, the preliminary implementation cost for the fiscal year 2021 was estimated at just over 1.2 million. Unfortunately, during this process, the COVID-19 pandemic rose, and it was evident that the economy was going to be affected. The estimated revenue impact has been stated to be approximately 20%. Due to this unprecedented situation, the difficult decision was made to place the potential implementation of the positional analysis on Plan B, the possible implementation in January of 2021. While staff understands that this is not the ideal situation, we cannot ignore the fact that our revenues are expected to decrease in light of the COVID pandemic. The placement of the implementation on the Plan B list allows the city to reevaluate our revenues in the fall and better understand how our economy has been affected. A mid-year implementation is estimated to cost approximately $600,000, and the breakdown of that $600,000 can be found on this slide. Keeping in mind that this cost that's here is an estimated implementation cost and does not take into consideration personnel changes that may occur during the first 6 months of the plan year. As a result, the estimated is subject to fluctuate based on personnel changes that happen, which can include things such as separations, hires, and the annual pay increase that Jill was just speaking about. With the implementation, yep.
Hey, Sean, if Jill could go back to the last slide, I just want to make sure that council and the public understands that the costs are identified here, whether it's the 600,000 as the total expected cost for the implementation, as well as the breakdown for each of these departments. This is what we're seeing here is half the cost. So because it's a Plan B item that could be implemented as in January 1st, it's not $1.2 million hit in this fiscal year. Potentially as a Plan B project consideration, it's a $600,000 expense, but the following year would be a 1.2 compounded number hit to the city's revenues. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at these cost breakdowns. These cost breakdowns equal 1/2 year of implementation. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. So now, with the implementation of a new proposed pay scale, there are many other behind the scenes processes that will need to be addressed as well. Baker Tilly, along with our executive staff, has already started to review the city's current performance evaluation process in an effort to provide a more streamlined tool for supervisors to use when evaluating employees. My department will work with Oracle to configure the system, which is the city's ERP system, to be able to administer the new pay scale throughout the organization. In addition to the software updates that are going to need to occur, policies and procedures will also need to be reviewed and revised as needed. Finally, our consultant will provide a final report and recommendation to council, and then, of course, implementation at our estimated January 1 start date. So that concludes the presentation I had for this morning. I would be open for questions if anybody has any.
I have a question.
Councilmember Grow.
Yeah, now that the Baker Tilly study has been completed and evaluated by administration, I think it'd be nice if the council could actually have a copy of that study so we could look at it too. When could we expect that in our inbox?
John, I can take this one if it's okay, and then please add to the conversation. The study has not been completed, so what we've identified is there's no study to share. Once the study is completed, what we will have Baker Tilly, the consultant, will come to a council meeting and present the findings of the study to the council, to the public, and to all that's interested. As Sean indicated on kind of the what next steps is that there is still more work to be done in terms of our ability to assess our FSLA, our evaluation process, our pay philosophy. All of those things we've hit pause, and we're now going through that process right now. What has been completed is all the individual numbers. When we take our 10 comparable cities that we've identified months ago, we've ran the numbers. We know what the markets are. We've adjusted job titles, and we have new salary ranges and potential adjustments for each individual employee up and down through the organization. But the study itself is underway.
Sean, if you could describe, it sounds like right now, even if we didn't have COVID in our world, a July 1 implementation couldn't happen just based on the timelines of the additional work that needs to be done. How quick could this be implemented if we got all the work done?
If it was at the direction of council that we were to implement at the beginning of the fiscal year, me and my staff could make it happen. There are some things that are still outstanding with our consultant that we are still working on. But as far as an administrative position, if we are ready to implement and can get ready as soon as the council is ready to move forward.
Okay. Do any other members of council have any questions at this time? We'll have opportunities after the full presentation, but specific to positional analysis.
I have a question. Are we concerned, you talk about additional time that they need to finish the positional analysis. Are we concerned with that they haven't been able to meet the time frame so far?
Mayor, Councilmember Dolan. So, with the there's some delays in terms of all the other components of the positional analysis. So what we talk about extensively with employees one-on-one and through the public meetings is where we focus ourselves on, right, the budget and the cost, as well as what that paycheck looks like for each of our employees. That's really what the focus is. But there's a whole lot more that's tied to the positional analysis study. So there's the FSLA, which basically means what employees are exempt and not exempt. We've done new job titles when we compare duties to other organizations, and we're going through an evaluation, a brand new evaluation across the board process, which is a really big deal. And we're talking with the executive team about pay philosophy when it comes to all this. Were there delays in the project? Yeah. Were those a decision made by staff to make sure the consultant is doing what they said they were going to do and make sure that they did it correctly, so that we're not implementing something that would be less than par? Absolutely. So, and then of course we've a lot of hiccups in the last couple months have put us in that position. Could we get it done July 1st? We could, but we don't have. And at least my recommendation in terms of the unknown with the budgets would be a very difficult situation. again, we don't want to implement something now that we're not 100, we're not confident that we can continue to pay for it on an ongoing annual basis. The worst case scenario here is that we would implement something and then have to take it back 6 months or 12 months later. That would be horrific to the organization, the morale, and all those involved. So, is that
Another
help, Jim?
question.
Councilmember
I guess
Dolan?
just clarifying what Plan B means also to the people at home. It's still in our budget, we'd still approve it, but it's something that we would approve for January, to start in January. Maybe we just explain the Plan B so people understand what Plan B means in terms of our budgeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Dolan. Absolutely. So Plan B is normally when we go through a budget process, we identify projects that are approved and we identify projects that are denied. And this year there's a third category, and that's maybe, and that's what we're identifying as Plan B projects. So we, when we develop the budget process, we're looking at we did a whole lot of unknowns. Are we seeing tourism in Lake Havasu City? Are we seeing the restaurants and the bars and grills opening back up, and we're seeing some of that volume that's coming through? That's providing dollars and revenues to those small businesses, and then through the collections for the city. That's good. Construction activity is also up in Lake Havasu City and it maintains very strong. Homes continue to be built, permits continue to be permitted, but we are seeing reductions in other portions of the economy with regards to car sales, retail, and other measures that the city relies on for dollars to provide services to the economy. So I think it's important for us to identify that. So with all of these unknowns going on, we've identified what we're calling Plan B, which is there's yes, there's no, and then there's Plan B. And Plan B says, let's put it in the budget, and hopefully we're going to have some dollars to move forward with it. We're going to plan as if that is the case, and then we'll come back in a few months. We'll take a look at the situation when we have more information in terms of the revenues that are being collected by the city, and at that point, we're going to feel pretty good about yes, we can expend dollars in certain areas, and or hopefully this isn't the case, but that we can't expend dollars in certain areas because the economy isn't coming back. Again, remember that our sales tax revenues, those reports are delayed 2 to 3 months. We won't get the April one till middle of next month. So we continue to collect data as we go. I feel pretty good about rebounding, but we have to be certain when we make these decisions. We can't undo them and work backwards. So that at a cost to the city in terms of finances, and at a cost to the employees' morale. So that's Plan B, is we push those decisions off until we know more information.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. I think that's a good point for people to understand, is there's a yes and there's a no, and it would have been on the yes, but with COVID-19, we just have to hold off on pulling that trigger, because if we do have to do other staffing issues, we don't want to have to reverse what we're doing now. I guess my biggest concern is the one size. I mean, we had planned on doing the one size fits all for the whole departments of the city as a whole. It is a little concerning that, you know, the police does make up a third of the budget for the positional analysis, and I do look at, you know, positions are different. You know, some positions we can hire right away. Other positions we do either have to get them in training, wait a year, get them to that point, and then hopefully they don't leave. There's also other positions we can also recruit from other locations, you know, and if we don't have that senior band in place, that is limiting. So I definitely, you know, trust Jess, the city manager, and Police Chief Doyle, that you guys are, you know, letting us know if we are in that area where it is as dire as maybe the association says, that we do have the ability to act quicker to catch up to that. So like I said, I guess my biggest concern is that they are 1/3 of that. So, but thanks for the update and appreciate it.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, I have a question. Can you tell me when we started this study? Because to me, it really feels like it's dragged out a lot, and it's really hard what's the process, like the actual process timeline that these studies take?
Sean, you want to take this one?
So we did start the process shortly after the beginning of the budget year, when an RFP went out for requests for proposals. We went through that process and selected the consultant that we currently have, Baker Tilly. We really kicked off the process at the end of August, starting in September, when we sent out positional analysis questionnaires to all of our employees and requested that they completed those so that the consultant can gather the job description information. After that, the city did go through and revised our market agencies so that we were prepared to send the survey out, which included compensation as well as benefits. That survey went out right about mid-November, and we did receive a lot of responses back from our comparable cities that just due to staffing shortages and due to the holidays, that they were not able to meet the consultant's timeline on completing the survey and getting it back. So most of our comparable agencies requested an extension into January to be able to complete the salary survey for the consultant. That did put us a little bit behind the schedule. Not being able to get the data back from our market agencies is paramount in being able to compare ourselves. So that did put us a little bit behind the schedule. And then as previously stated, we did receive the specifics from the study right at the beginning of February, right after our February 6th planning session with council. Since then, staff has been diligently working to compare what the consultant has provided to us and ensure that our internal equity with positions was accurate. And that is where we're at this point. So it is a very long, drawn out process. It takes a lot of staff time and scheduling to be able to come together and review all of the information to ensure that it does meet the needs of the city.
Donna, can you tell me, like, what are we looking at? How much longer before this study is going to be completed?
At this time, I don't have a tentative end date. We do still have quite a bit of work to do with the consultant with regards to the development of our new performance evaluation process, which was included in the scope of work. That's really where we're transitioning right now from the positional analysis side of it into the performance evaluation side of it. We heard a lot of feedback from executive staff at a meeting we had earlier with the consultant that there is a consensus to streamline and reduce the performance evaluation process. So once we get that all finalized, I do believe that we will be able to wrap up pretty quickly. But again, it's all determined based off of getting information from the consultant and then getting it back to executive staff, scheduling meetings, and getting everybody on board with where we're going moving forward.
One more question. When we hired this consultant, did we have a general idea how long these studies take? I mean, did they give you an estimate of how long these take? Because like I'm saying, it seems like it's really dragged on, and I understand the delays, but I mean, we're this a year and we're still talking about it and we don't have a finished product.
So the estimated timeline that was included in the scope of work was approximately 6 months. And that is on a best case scenario. So that time frame did not take into consideration any hiccups that came along in the road. The fact that we did have an extended period of time that our market agencies needed to be able to respond to the survey, like I said before, did really put us behind schedule. It is not uncommon when doing this type of a study that they do go over the time frame established at the scope of work process. Because there are a lot of variables that take place when we're going through this process. And it takes a lot of executive staff meetings to be able to come together and review all of the data. So it is not uncommon that these types of studies do go over the time frame established at the beginning of the process.
And Mayor, Councilmember Lynn, if I can as well too, this process would go a whole lot quicker if I would just sit in a room by myself and make the decisions. That's not the process that we want to unfold here. So that we're engaging with the department heads and the team, the executive team, the brain trust of the organization to make some determinations on what's best for the organization. So it is it's a belabored process, but we want to make sure that what we do is important. But again, in terms of your question about the consultant, yeah, we're holding that consultant accountable for their actions, and we need to make sure that the final product that they deliver is perfect.
Yeah, I have a question about the two questions actually. One is what the net effect would be to the budget. We have step increases planned for I guess the first 6 months in the budget. What would the total implementation cost be or impact to the budget be if you took those into account? So it's 1.2 for 1 year, but if we take into account what we already have budgeted, what's that difference we're looking at? I don't know if anyone would have that number easily or readily available. And then the second question is what, from today's forward, what is the council's involvement in the positional analysis? So I know we'll have a hearing, but what else are we going to be involved in other than approving the budget?
Jill, could you address the first question in terms of what that ongoing cost is, not just for this next fiscal year, but 2 budgets out, what the difference would be? We get right now, I think in this fiscal year, when we look at the cost for employee increases, it's roughly $600,000. We do have roughly 75 employees right now in the organizations that are topped out, that don't receive an annual adjustment. So with the positional analysis, that all changes. So there will be a cost to the organization greater than the $600,000 that we're seeing in this year's budget. That's not positional analysis, that's step increases for employees. But Jill, do you have a number, or could you talk us through that scenario?
Yeah, I don't have a breakdown for that specifically, but we've included what for the first half of the year, what the increases would be just under the current system. And with an annual total of about $30 million, that'd be 15 million at the 2% rate. So, probably 3 million is in the budget already for increases between now and December 31st. So as a quick estimate.
Yeah, thank you. Then who would want to talk through the process of what the additional council involvement is from today forward?
Sean, do you want to start, and then I'll take it from there?
So the executive staff will come together and complete the rest of the process. We will finalize all of the stuff with the pay scale and the placement on the pay scale. We will finalize the end product with what we're going to do with implementation of a new performance evaluation process. Staff will also go through and update the policies and procedures. As far as council involvement in all of that stuff, I'm not sure of what level of involvement council will have in those processes. Definitely there will be a presentation by our consultant at the end of when the positional analysis report is completed by Baker Tilly, and they'll come in and they'll give the final report to council for council's approval for a January 1 implementation.
And so that presentation will be made by the consultant. We'll discuss in detail up and down. We'll have that final report that's been requested. Again, I'll talk about the pay, but also talk about all the other components that are tied to this project, which are very, very important for the ongoing health of the organization. And again, our goal here with the positional analysis is to attract and retain quality employees. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's a very comprehensive understanding. When we go through that process for the presentation, all of the different recommendations and all that will be discussed at that time. We'll hear council feedback, and we'll look at the implementation of that as it moves forward. Obviously, there is some discretion that's given to the city manager in terms of the personnel portion of it, but I want to engage council. I want to engage the department heads. I want to engage the employees, and want to make sure that we're doing something that's going to have a positive impact. This should be a really good project as we move forward with it too, and we got to make sure that that's the case.
I have a question just to make sure I understand correctly. So on the initial slides, the expenditure budget overview, we had a 2% increase over the prior budget, which we just said was about $3 million. Is that correct?
Yes, for an annual amount, yes.
And then that goes towards step increases.
And all of the associated increases that go with that. When you pay more for a salary, you're paying more for overtime, you're paying more for ASRS, workers' comp, disability, everything that is based upon a salary dollar amount.
Okay, so we're spending 3 million to increase our personnel in some sort of wages, but I guess my concern is if we were to take the 1.2 million of that 3 million and bring everybody to the level they should be, that would leave us 1.8 million or a 1.2% increase over prior budget. Is that something we could do? Because then now we'd have everybody level. We still have the $3 million we're spending, and then that 1.2 that's 1.2 million or 1.8 million that would be left would then go across the board. And then of course, it sounds like the next step we need to figure out is the performance evaluations as a whole, which might change anyway. Is that an option, or is that too far outside the realm of what could happen, I guess?
My understanding of the 600,000 is that it's on top of what our costs would have otherwise been. So it's not, the 600,000 isn't part of that increase. It was in addition to what was budgeted for the increases should nothing happen. So
That's what I mean. Yeah, I know it's not part of it, but we're going to spend $3 million more this year on staffing for the increases as a whole. But why couldn't we take the 1.2, do the 1.2, per se, or the 600,000, but do 1.2 as of July 1st, and then we have that last 1.8 million to spread out on evaluations and increases. And
yeah, maybe I'm just not understanding, but the actual increases of 3 million is what would happen if we did nothing. So if we implemented the 1.2 early, technically we've only budgeted 600,000 for the 1.2 impact.
Well, I mean, we budgeted 3 million over last year then, right?
Right, but if we want to substitute the 1.2 for what we've already budgeted, we have to assume that many aspects of that 3 million that were budgeted will actually not happen, which there could be some overlap there. It's hard to identify exactly what that overlap number would be. So, to be conservative, we just included the 600,000 on top of the 3 million. So there could be some savings there. I don't think it would be to the extent to cover the entire amount, though.
Okay. Like I said, it just seems like if we're giving 3 million increases across the board, a little bit to everybody, but we still have departments that are off, and we have shortages in police that, like I said, instead of a 2% increase over prior budget, if we did a 1% increase, we could also roll in the positional analysis. But like I said, maybe I'm misunderstanding it wrong. We've already budgeted 3 million for increases. Why can't we take the 1.2 out of that because it is an increase?
Yeah, Councilmember Dolan, there's also the attrition factor that's in there too. So the numbers are just a little bit different. When you go to the back of the budget book is where, if I recall correctly, is where the attrition calculation was. So I see where you're going. And when I go through the budget book, it looks like the impact might be around 381,000. If I take the longevity pay that's budgeted per line item, add those up and take it out of the 1.2, it looks like there would be an impact. We'd have to find 381,000, but we still have to talk about future years. And with the uncertainty, that's where it starts getting a little tricky.
Okay, yeah, I guess it just seems like we have the whole staff and we're giving everybody that little performance. Some people get it, some people don't, but we're spending 3 million to make minor adjustments. But we still have gaps in certain departments that I almost think that would be more of a priority to fix that first with any increases rather than giving, if we're going to give gradual steps, I would maybe see that more as a plan B option rather than getting us in line with where we should be.
Yeah, one of the objectives for the positional analysis, although it's taking a really long time to do this, we've been talking about it for quite some time, but one of the objectives was to do it right. Some of the challenges that we're having now, and and some of the compression issues that our team members have experienced is because we did quick fixes by department or by band or by position to make some corrections. And the whole intent here was to do a system-wide approach so that we didn't have those issues going into the future. And again, it's taking a long time, but I think the end result will be very positive. We just need to make sure it's implemented in the correct way, because we've committed as a council to our team members that we were going to do this. And it still is, as I'm hearing from this discussion and our last few discussions on budget, remains a top priority of the council. Are there any other questions specific to positional analysis? Vice Mayor Lane?
If I may, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what I hear, and I hear it from the council members, I hear it from the staff, and I definitely hear it from the employees, is frustration. We've been talking about this positional analysis now for, gosh, it seems like 2 years. Hold on, we're going to do this positional analysis. Hold on, we're going to do this positional analysis. And now we've started into this positional analysis. And, you know, we hear from the employee organizations, but there are many more employees that are outside those organizations that we don't really hear from. And they're just as frustrated, whether they're over in operations or if they're in wastewater or Parks and Rec or wherever they happen to be from. There's a lot of frustration, I think, because we have been talking about the positional analysis for so long. And I believe all the council members are just as frustrated. I know I am. Mr. Knudsen and I had a meeting the other day. He's frustrated as well because we want to be able to implement this plan sooner rather than later. The most important asset we have is our employees. It's more important even than buying new vehicles. But we do have to maintain our infrastructure as well. I would love to be able to find $1.2 million in the budget. Maybe if we continue to go through this, we can find that, and maybe we can implement this before January. I do know that we are in this budget. There is pay increases. I feel bad for the people that are at the top step. I've said this since the beginning. I don't like the way we do it in the first place, because once you reach that top step, you never get a pay increase. And that's not fair, because the people that are at that top step are our longest employees. Those that have been here, that have stuck out year after year and put the time in, and then they reach that top step and then they don't get anything else. And so I want to see this process change, and I want to see it implemented sooner rather than later. I'm very, very frustrated, but I would like definitely let's take a look and see if we can make this happen before January. In as far as Plan B goes, and it's in January, we need to implement it. Even if it is Plan B, it needs to be implemented sometime during this year, because we have to take care of our employees. And yes, it's going to be year after year. And I totally understand what Councilmember Dolan is trying to say. If we're already going to do the positional analysis at 1.2 million for the year, that would be those step increases that we're talking about, the 3 million. So you would basically take that 1.2 out of that 3 million to move forward, because we're giving that step increase through the positional analysis program. So there wouldn't be an additional step increase on top of that. So that's the way I understand it anyway. So I just wanted to express to all the employees, we feel your frustration, because we're just as frustrated as you are. And we want to see this implemented immediately, if at all possible. But if not, definitely implement it before the end of the calendar year. Thank you.
If I could just jump in on what David said, I guess that's my initial concern. Is we have 3 types of employees. We have one is the employee that's covered under the positional analysis, who's not getting paid at the level they should be paid at market value. They may be getting the increase or not getting the increase, but that's one employee that's not getting paid where they should be. We have another class of employee where they're probably paid where they should be paid, but they're getting the bonus, that they'll get the increase. And then we have about 75 staff members or employees that are assuming it might be paid where they should be paid, but then are not getting the bonus because they've matched out. So we're spending 3 million on that middle group where everybody gets a little bit, but we have the people that aren't going to get anything increased, but we also have the people that are not being paid what they should be paid. So I guess my concern is, of that 3 million, we should prioritize those that are not at market value first before we give little increases across the board, which we should do anyway, but hopefully that's what I'd like to see, that if we push till January. So that was just my explanation of, and David Lane kind of hit on it, so I just want to explain that. So thank you.
Yeah, a point of clarification real quick is the number that's in the budget right now for step increases is about 218,000 total. So Jill's giving the total number, but if that's, and Jill, where I'm getting that number from is the longevity pay line item per department. And I just calculated them for the department set it was listed. It's about 218,000. So the 3 million is the total number. So I can see where there's a little bit of confusion there, but that's how it was separated out in this area.
Yeah, the number that you see for salaries and wages is the actual total that's budgeted. And so we budgeted 24.8 in 1920, and we're going to budget 25.3 prior to the position analysis. So that's the actual increase overall to the salaries.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead, Vice Mayor, if that's okay with you.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to clarify based on what Jill said and then based on what the mayor just said. The 1.2 million, and Jess, you can probably answer this question better. The 1.2 million, is that total cost, including the increase to their retirement system, increase to their medical cost, increase across the board for everything? So I believe, as the mayor said, it's 300,000 for the pay increase, but I thought the 1.2 million was all the costs associated with every single pay raise, because as Jill said earlier, every time their hourly wage goes up, every other cost associated with that employee also goes up.
Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, no, the 1.2 million is simply the cost that's reflected. That's the best way to put it. The funds that are directly included in the paycheck. So when we start talking about the step increases for a couple $100,000 every year, Jill's previous slide talked about the increases to the ASRS, to the public safety retirement system, to the healthcare plan, all the different costs that ripple through the organization. That's why that when I talk about these are compounded every year, and we have to be confident that we can absorb those costs, not just in year one, but in future years. So when you talk about the big number that I think that Jill, that you're indicating in terms of the 3 million, that's the ripple effect of the pension, the disability, the insurance, all those things that are included in there. That when we talk about the $1.2 million, there is more of a cost to the organization. That is just what is reflected in the employees' paychecks.
So if that is just what's in their paychecks, what is the overall cost of implementing this process?
So when we look at the overall cost, we take the cost difference between what would normally be and what the new cost would be. And so we're indicating that that cost on an ongoing annual basis. The last number that I heard from Ms. Olson was between 1.2, 1.3 in addition every single year moving forward. Moreover than what we're paying right now. That moreover than what the cost is to the organization right now.
Right. No, I understand that. What my question is that will be for every year from here to eternity. But what my question is, the 1.2 million, is that the total cost of the positional analysis, including all of the other costs that go along with the pay raise, or is that just the increase to their paycheck?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, the 1.2 reflects just the increase to the paycheck, just wages. Now the ripple effect throughout the rest of the budget is much more than the 1.2.
And what I would like to see what the total cost of implementing the positional analysis would be. I thought that's what the 1.2 million was the implementation costs across the board, not just salary increases to paychecks. because I mean, I'm totally aware that every time if you increase their pay by a nickel, that has a ripple effect all the way down the road. And that's the cost I'd like to see, is the end cost, with every single penny accounted for in putting this plan into place.
And I would say that the 1.2, when you add the, the average of all of those related costs, your 1.2 becomes 1.8 to 2 million.
So the actual cost of implementing this positional analysis is closer to 2 million per year, not 1.2 million.
Incrementally, yes.
Okay. And that's every year moving forward.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on positional analysis before we move on to the rest of the presentation? Again, we can circle back to positional analysis questions and any other questions once we have the rest of the report. Mr. Grote, do you have a question?
I do, sir.
Yes.
Listening to everybody else's questions and the answers given provides additional clarity. And then the last one, employee-related expenses, probably somewhere in the 35-45% range, which is pretty common in a municipality. Could be a little higher, could be a little lower, depending. But the one thing that we don't do in smaller organizations like this city that they do in Fortune 500 companies is, at least not regularly, we don't look at the opportunity cost. In other words, I'm just going to give you an example, and it's anecdotal. So but I've been told by a source who I consider very reliable that the previous human resources director was asked very directly, what is a fully weighted cost of a new firefighter, as an example? I'll just use that, but the same would apply for police as well, and other elements of our organization. And to go through all the training and the certifications and everything you need, it's a longitudinal process, probably takes about 2 years. So the best way to look at the costs was over a 2-year stretch of time. And it comes to about $180,000. That's salary, EREs, training costs, onboarding costs, et cetera, everything associated with human resources. So in a Fortune 500 company, what we do is we look at that and you extrapolate that out over the course of thousands and thousands of employees, and it makes a huge difference to your bottom line, although it's not recorded in your profit and loss sheet the way you would normally see it. So that's one of the things that this Baker Tilly study could provide to the people on this council who authorized and advocated for this study. That's all done from what I'm hearing now. What we lack at this moment is the executive staff doing review performance evaluation processes, configuring Oracle, the training, the revised evaluation process and train, all those sorts of things. Those are internal items that we assume through our human resources department. What we want to see to help us understand what the opportunity cost is to our city is, what do the wages come back like compared to other cities? Because that's what the people who leave us are going to look at. They're not going to be interested in our performance evaluation process or how it does or doesn't change. What they're going to be interested in is, if I make $14 an hour here and I can make $20 an hour in Las Vegas or Phoenix, that's all they need to know. Benefits are going to be roughly similar. That's what we want to know. And so that helps us as we look through this and decide where we want to go ultimately as we work through this budget process. So I'm going to return to my question, which is, when can we have a copy of the Baker Tilly positional analysis data given to us in our boxes so we can look at that as a council, and then we are able to interact with our city and the budget process more effectively?
Mayor, Councilmember Grote, the presentation coming from Baker Tilly, I fully anticipate that. I hate throwing out a date, and Sean will probably throw something at me through Zoom here, but
Mr. City Manager, but that's not the question. You misunderstood me. I'm not
I have a report.
the entire report. I'm interested in the actual dollars and cents of wages between the comparable cities and Lake Havasu. That I heard has already been completed. That's what we want to see, and that's what we need to see.
So you would like every individual employee's the job title that they have up and down throughout the whole entire organization. You want to see what each employee's difference is in wage, where it sits right now, and what that wage would be if the city was able to implement that on January 1st, or if we couldn't. That's the data that we have, right? The raw data that we have right now. That's that's where the numbers at.
That I think what people would like to see.
So one of the concerns that we have, and I'm open for conversations and talk this thing through, is that if we identify an employee, say we identify Sean, I'll pick on you. Well, they're going to identify your wage, and right now say that wage is X amount, and the new wage is going to be X plus one. So now Sean goes into the situation knowing that the wage is what that is. When we get to, and then we have 6 months or hopefully less, right? That we can get to before we make that decision. So then those numbers sit out there, and between now and then, that provides a little bit of a discomfort to the employees across the board. So that's where we're at in terms of waiting to introduce those numbers in terms of every individual employee's current wage versus what the new wage would be, and then waiting 6 months before we make a determination of whether or not we can implement that. With that being said, we've listed all the 10 comparable cities. The two associations that we have many departments, but the two associations, fire and police, they've done the analysis. So all of that is there. So in the analysis that they come back with, when they look at the comparable cities, it's scientific, and they're coming back with the exact same results that we're coming back through that same process. But I'm not trying to be obstinate, but I'm trying to explain what some of the heartburn would be for the employees in the organization if we release those wages and what those increments might be, without 100% confidence that we're going to see an increase with, or to be able to implement the Plan B scenario or the positional analysis.
Well, then a reasonable compromise might be that you don't need to go through each and every one of those. Why not focus on the two areas, which is public safety, which has been the largest pain point, and then you have a lot of entry-level positions there, which is really where we're focusing. Anytime you have specific positions that could create heartburn, as you point out accurately, you could just simply redact that. What we're really looking at is entry level and the lower ends, and of course we already know about the compaction issues. We just want to get a better grip on what those dollars and cents look like. How far is that distance? And the reason I think people would like to see that is we want to assess how many people we think we're going to lose if we have a long state from now of inaction till January 1st, or if we were to try to move forward in July.
Councilmember McCoy?
Yes, thank you. I would just, since we're talking about the associations, Councilmember Grote mentioned studying those too. I would like to ask Chief Doyle about the letter that was read to us, the POA letter, and his feelings of that, if I may.
Mayor, Council, Councilperson McCoy. I read the letter, and I think it's important to express that where their frustration actually comes from is it's not the officers just saying that they want money, but I think it's important to understand that going back to 2007, we had 96 officers on the department. We were authorized for 96. Since 2007, we've been reduced. We've gone down to 80 sworn police officer positions. We've been losing our officers. I've lost one officer a month for the last 4 months. They're going to cities such as Mesa, Goodyear, DPS, and the impact that has on the other officers is this. Right now, with 9 open police officer positions, with people that are out injured, and with people that are currently in the academy and training process, we're actually operating with 63 sworn police officers. That includes myself, my captains, and such. We have a traffic unit that at one point had 5 traffic officers and a sergeant. We have 1 traffic officer and a sergeant who is working traffic to try to shore that up. A street crimes unit that had 4, it's down to 2. Patrol shifts that were manned with between 8 to 10 that are now being manned as low as 5 patrol officers on a shift working the street. So what happens is, in order to shore up patrol, is we have to pull detectives, we have to pull people out of assignments that they worked many years to try to get. We have to pull them back and put them into patrol to try to shore that up. Since 2007, we've been asking them do more with less, pick up additional duties, and they've been doing it. So that's where their frustration comes from, and that's what you're seeing in that letter is they're anxious. They don't want to lose any more officers, as every officer we lose pulls one more person out of patrol and causes one more person to be shifted back to patrol to try to make sure that we have a minimum. We try to keep at least 6 officers on the street at any one time. So we've lost 1 officer a month for the last 4 months, and I know we've got some more officers testing. So a lot of these things are all coming to head at the same time. I know the Police Officer Association, they went out to all the cities and they got all the data from them independent, and they brought that data back. They did provide that to me. And as our city manager stated, it is right in line with what we received from Baker Tilly. And I think that I am happy with the results that I've seen from Baker Tilly. I've been able to look at that salary range. I think it's a very good salary range. I think it'll go a long way to the retention of our officers, as well as recruitment. So yes, it is. I'd love to see this happen as quickly as the city can afford to implement it. As was stated in their letter, when we do lose an officer, it takes us a year before we can replace that officer. Even if we can pick up a lateral from another agency, it's still a 6-month process to fill that vacancy. So every officer that leaves puts us a year behind, and it's struggling, and every employee in the department has been picking up the slack to try to cover that. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, as far as I'm concerned, that's it in a nutshell. That's what we need to be thinking about and talking about. I understand what's going on, but we cannot afford to have 6 officers on the street, 2 people doing patrol. To me, this is astounding that we've gotten to this point. We have got to take care of our employees. Nobody wants to see the bad things happen with, first off, not having the police officers that our city needs and taking, forever to get back to them. There are things that have to be taken care of, and that's our first responders. Absolutely. And I just, I appreciate everything that's been said, with our vice mayor, and I think you're right on. But to me, this tells the story right there. Thank you.
If I could jump in, thank you, Chief. I couldn't agree more. I guess that's my biggest concern is we're lumping it as part of positional analysis, which it's a pay issue, but it's a public safety issue. We have spots we can't fill. There are shortages. I think a lot of people are, it's hard to get recruits. I know some of the other agencies have recruiting issues as well. And, in the private sector, what you do is if you're not paying enough, you're just not going to get the people. And those that are paying, even in a shortage, you can be fully staffed if you're paying enough that those that want to do it come to you. So, I guess, yeah, my concern is just the public safety side. We also think that, we have a problem. We call the 911, the police show up and they take the person away and the problem's solved. Well, it's also a bigger issue too. It goes into our court system. If we have one court and we can't keep up, they basically it becomes a revolving door. If we have the same limited police officers arresting the same people over and over again because we're not giving them the tools to do what they need to do. So I thank you for your insight and giving us that information, and hopefully we can come up with something sooner or later to fix that, because like I said, I know 4 over the last 4 months we've lost 1 a month. who's to say we're going to lose another 9 by the end of the year? We might not, but it definitely shows we do have a major problem that we need to address. And like I said, maybe it's bigger than just the positional analysis. I mean, which, like I said, they do represent 1/3 of the whole positional analysis budget. Not to take anything away from all the other departments, but like I said, if we have positions we can't even fill and we're not competitive, then we're not going to fill those positions. So thank you.
Do we have any other questions on this topic? All right, then I think we'll go back to Ms. Olson to continue the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. So now we've discussed personnel and we'll move on to the services, supplies, and capital area. So overall, we have about a $2.2 million increase over the prior year's budget. The majority of that is in the utility funds, water and wastewater. We also have, this is just a partial list of additions that we've included. You'll see all the details in your books. For the 2 police items there, for about $142,000, we do have an offset of revenue in the form of either donations, grants, or other restricted revenue accounts that we have in place for the police department. And then we also included the election costs, which are not an annual item. Then we took a look at the Plan B list. As we discussed, Plan B are those things that may or may not move forward in the budget, depending upon the recovery of our revenues. It is about a $5.2 million increase over the prior budget. Of that is about $2.3 million for the general fund. And again, this is just a partial list of additions from the Plan B list. But you can see on there, there's 4 patrol vehicles, the fire department CERT vehicle, an additional command vehicle, some more tools and supplies, mowers for Parks and Rec. And then we have maintenance items that are needed in Public Works, including wastewater and the water utility funds. Then looking at other revenues and expenditures that are included in the overall budget, the total that we've included in the budget for contingency for all funds is about $2.6 million. And again, contingency funds are for those things that we don't budget, but we find that we need throughout the year that are critical. For the general fund, we did increase contingency from $500,000 to $1 million, mostly because of the unknowns that exist in this budget right now. And the budget's going to be adopted before we even really get any data that indicates what the revenues may actually be. So that's just to give us some flexibility there. And then it's been mentioned before, but we did include an additional $10 million in the general fund to provide for that flexibility in managing our resources. So the 10 million could come in the form of grants, as Mr. Knudsen mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, form of grants, additional reimbursements, or any reimbursement from the state or federal level, or just a recovery in the revenues, that it's greater than what we had projected in our numbers. So that has been added due to the way the state requires us to cap our budgets. When it's adopted, we cannot spend any more than that adopted amount, regardless of the amount of revenues that we bring in. So that hopefully keeps the council from having their hands tied should we have some positive results related to recovery and revenues associated with that. Again, we had talked about the request by the departments. They put in for their base budgets, which their base budgets is where we started for the 2021 fiscal year. And that is the prior 1920 budget as it was adopted, less any one-time expenditures for that year. Then the departments put together their requests and they prioritize those requests in each of their lists for the supplemental items that they needed in addition to the base budget. Right now, the supplemental approved came in at about 19%. There was a total of $11.3 million requested. We had 2.2 million that we were able to approve. And then we have, again, the $5.1 million for the Plan B items, which is about 35% of those additions. The supplemental items, there were about 286 of them. So it was quite a list, but it was prioritized, which helped us determine which items went into which of these categories. So the majority of the items went into the deferred column. We just weren't able to or identify any funds for those deferred items. Should we start to recover and get additional revenues, those will be first applied to those Plan B items as they're listed. And this does exclude the grants. And just a brief look at just the total budgets for the departments. This is the budget for the 2021 fiscal year. And in your books, you'll see the additional years listed for comparison purposes. And you'll find that in the detail at the back of your book. And some of these big numbers, like in water and wastewater in particular includes, we do include for the utility funds, since they are enterprise funds, we have to include depreciation. And we also include any debt payments. You may recall it was mentioned at the last work session. It was also mentioned during the council's workshop in February. The fact that even before the pandemic, we had a structural deficit in particular in the general fund, but it's not exclusive to the general fund, where our revenues are not exceeding our expenditures just on an annual basis. We do not cover the cost of our services at the current level by the current revenues that we're bringing in. It's important that we at least consider identifying additional revenue sources so that we can provide our services at the existing level. However, due to the financial hardship on the community caused by the pandemic, staff, though we're recommending a commercial lease tax for this fiscal year, we're not recommending its implementation or its effective date to occur until the end of the fiscal year, maybe in the May or June timeframe. The commercial lease tax is an area that staff felt might be appropriate for an additional tax. It would be a tax on any leases for commercial purposes, including storage units, office spaces, etc. Lake Havasu is only one of only three cities, I should say, that has no commercial lease tax. You'll see on this chart, we have listed the comparable cities and how we compare to them. And that red line across, going straight across.
You can take mine. Yeah.
The red line going straight across represents the average commercial lease tax for our comparable cities. The statewide average for all the cities has an average rate of about 2.5%. So staff, is recommending the addition of a commercial lease tax, hopefully at the end of this fiscal year. The estimated revenue right now for each 1% tax, we would generate probably, we're estimating between $250,000 and $300,000. So in other words, for a 3% commercial lease tax, we would have $750,000 hopefully at a minimum, which would be a significant help to the budget. When we discussed the need for additional revenues, we did bring up some other areas. We're not recommending increases in those areas, but we did want to show you those categories and just how we relate to our comparable cities and what the average is for those comparables. So for the property taxes, you can see that Lake Havasu City is below the average rate. And the average primary rate is about 1.277, and we're at 0.6718. For bed taxes, we are just above the average, which the average is about 2.85 for a bed tax, 2.85%. And for city sales tax, it shows we have a 2% sales tax and we are below the comparable average of 2.3%. So that just gives you an idea of how we compare to some of our comparable cities when we compare ourselves for wage and salary purposes. This is how we compare from it on the tax-based purpose. So the next steps in this process, at your next regular meeting on June 9th, we will bring to you the 5-year CIP and the tentative operating budget for adoption. Then on the 23rd, we will have the truth and taxation hearing and adopt the final budget. And again, as a reminder, the tentative budget, when council adopts that, that sets the cap for what we can spend in the budget. The tentative budget you can have an adopted budget that's lower than your tentative budget. You cannot adopt a final budget that is higher than your tentative budget. And then on Tuesday, July 14th is when the property tax levies would be adopted by council for assessment in the following year. And with that, we will answer any additional questions that council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Do any council have additional questions now that we went through the entire presentation? A few comments when you speak of the property tax levy, Ms. Olson. It's important to note that on page 20 of the budget book, it kind of shows a historical area in our property tax rate has been the same for what, four years right now. We've kept the rate the same. Also, just to circle back a little bit to the positional analysis, when we had our budget or our planning session in February, and we discussed the priorities for the budget and what direction we were giving to staff, we had talked about some sort of additional revenues and gave staff direction to look at what those might look like, with a particular interest on that commercial lease tax going into effect on July 1 with the budget. Obviously, now is not the time with all this uncertainty, and when Mr. Knudsen and department directors were putting together the meat of this budget was right at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and post our planning session in February, so end of February and March, when there was so much uncertainty. There still is, obviously, but that's kind of with some of these timing issues is we had a plan in place on how to fund it, and that funding plan has been impacted from it. And then also Ms. Olson reviewed $10 million in funding, new funding based on grants or things like that. It's important to note that through the CARES Act, that's the federal legislation that was supporting the efforts of businesses and citizens and cities and counties throughout the nation. Governor Ducey was awarded over $1 billion to the state with the intent of that funding to come to counties and cities and towns. We just don't know how that is going to look or if that's going to be. In the CARES Act, it allowed for cities that had a population of over 500,000 to get direct funding from the CARES Act from the federal government, and then cities and counties under 500,000 got pooled into a fund that, again, the governor has. So there's uncertainty there too. So it's just important that all of these different factors come together. Given all of those factors, I really applaud Mr. Knudsen, Ms. Olson, and all the department directors and city staff for putting all of these pieces together to ensure that the city can operate currently and then also implement the plans that we have based on information as it comes. And it's coming quickly and changing fast because of all the impacts to the economy and from stimulus and grants and those types of things. So thank you for all your hard work through this process. And also Ms. Bakken, who's put together most of the stuff here that we're seeing today. So thank you for that. Do any of the council members have comments, questions or want to circle back on anything else that was in the presentation? Yeah, Councilmember McCoy?
Yes, I just wanted to say that on Tuesday of this week, I was at the TAC meeting for the MPO and talking about the CARES Act and so forth. I mean, what they're predicting that is going to come to our small cities is going to be awful. They're saying that the HERF has been suspended until 2022. And that they're figuring the losses for transportations. I mean, they're looking at 150 million that we're going to lose that had been projected for Arizona, and so it's going to be very difficult in the future doing all of the things that we want to do until this turns around and comes back. But I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has done on the budget. This is a horrible time. The people I have heard from are, of course, the business owners that don't feel that they can afford a new tax right now because they're trying to give discounts to the individuals that rent from them and so forth. And I understand that, but it's one of those things that it's hurt us all, and it's there are certain things we have to do to keep our city running. And those are the things that, somebody said that our budget looked like it was a lot of wants, not a lot of, needs. I don't think that's true at all. I think we've go after our needs, and we're putting the wants out there for a later date. And I know that that's been a lot of hard work for our city staff and everyone involved in this. But there are certain things that we just can't put off. And like you said, the taxes for property taxes and commercial, we have to have new revenue from someplace. And I don't know where. I don't want to be the person to point them out, but I think it's going to take all of us saying, well, we've all got to pull our part in this. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, staff, for all your hard work. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember McCoy.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor Lane.
Thank you. First off, thank you to the staff for putting this together. It's really, looking at the budgets over the last few years, it's really been tough. The expenses are outweighing the revenue that we have coming in. It's been ongoing now for several years. And we need to have some very tough conversations on how we want to move forward in the future. To the employees that are out there that we've said, please hold off, please hold off, please hold off. Thank you for your patience. We do appreciate it. We do understand that you want this positional analysis just as badly as we do. With that said, we're also trying to take care of you through the evaluation process and those step increases. In the meantime, we're going to have some very tough conversations coming up in the future. We have to build a new courthouse. Constitutionally, people have rights to speedy trials, and we have to ensure that we're giving our employees, the judge, the city attorney, the city manager, the tools that they need in order to do their job. And right now, I think we're lacking in that a bit. And because the reason behind that is funding. We don't have the funding that we truly need. So we need to come up with some sort of a revenue source. The public is telling us all the time, they want better roads. They want more fire. They want more police. They want more this and they want more that. Well, we have to pay for it. And nobody wants to have those really tough decisions, but we're going to have those tough decisions. And we're going to upset some people. Undoubtedly, I've already been told by certain members of the community on what it is that they expect from me. And I'm here to represent the entire community and to make sure that this city stays whole and to have those tough conversations. And I believe over these next few years, we're going to have some even worse conversations than what we're having right now. And it's tough because of this COVID. We're losing the IDD in 2 years. That's $5 million out of the budget that we use for our irrigation and drainage. We're going to have to figure out where we're going to absorb that $5 million, or going to the people and saying, how do you want to make this up? You want to have another district? Do you want to raise the water rates? What is it that you all want to do in order to make this work? So thank you to the staff. This is not an easy process. This pandemic has destroyed anything that we had planned for this, for the next few months, because we don't even know where we're at as far as revenues for the last 2 months. So putting together a budget with not even knowing how much revenue you have coming in is very, very difficult. And it's not just the city. The people at home are having the same issues. People that have been laid off from their employment, people that are trying to collect unemployment, trying to hold their businesses together. So it's a citywide issue. We understand that, and we understand that raising revenues is never an easy conversation. So with that, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
I could jump in really quick. Also want to thank the staff for putting all this together, and we get to jump in and break it apart a little bit, but you guys have been working on this for a long time, and it's definitely not an easy equation to figure out. So thank you for that. I guess the one question I have is maybe we talked about the bed tax, and if we know what the commercial tax would do if we raised it. Maybe we could get some numbers by next time if we did, if we looked at raising sales tax by so many percent, or what would that be as an increase? Same thing with the bed tax. What if we, if we were to raise it incrementally, what would that mean as income goes? We definitely, like Vice Mayor Lane said, I mean, people don't want to necessarily see increases, but you get what you pay for. I mean, I've said that before. We are our number one priority is to provide public safety, and we're having issues meeting that goal right now with staffing, with equipment, we need to spend more money in that area to be where we need to be, and we don't have that money. So we need to spend money on that. Like I said, too, we're also a nonprofit water and sewer utility corporation. We're going to lose $5 million in revenue when the IDD expires. Think about it. If it was passed off to a public held company, our water bills would probably be at least twice or more what they are right now. So if our property taxes have to go up a little bit to pay for those services, we need to pay those services. And if people don't want to pay those services, I mean, there are other cities that they can live in where it's cheaper, but you get different parks, you get different public safety. So we just, we need to pay for what we're giving the community. So like I said, I guess my thing is I would just like to maybe see if we did discuss raising rates on the property taxes and sales taxes, incrementally what that would mean in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dolan. I think this is our last budget work session before we meet again to adopt a tentative budget. So we might not be completely prepared, but I think it's worth talking through those questions that you had. At the council planning session in February, we talked about taking a look at a variety of different revenue sources, and Ms. Olson and her team presented some of those options to us in our CIP budget work session a couple of weeks ago. When we look at the sales tax, there's the comparative that they reviewed with us, and that impacts every citizen across the community. And the commercial lease tax, at least during the planning session, my recollection is that has the least impact to everyone, to all the citizens, but the highest output, if you will, for us to be able to achieve our goals. When it comes to the bed tax area, that's been an area that you may recall in, I think our last council meeting, or maybe 2 council meetings ago, we adopted a new contract with the Partnership for Economic Development, which gets some of those funds. And that's a certain contract with an actual amount, leaving some opportunity to use the excess revenues in that area for other services in the community, which was one of the overarching goals of that process. So we have some of those pieces together. I don't know if Mr. Knudsen or Ms. Olson want to talk a little bit about sales tax or impacts to that. Also, when it comes to the property tax, it's just been the last several years that we've kept the rate flat. But the revenue increases by keeping the rate flat because of the assessed values on the increase in home values around our community. But prior to that, there was policies in place that councils kept adjusted the rates so the revenue would be the same, meaning that the rate actually would fluctuate up and down, but didn't give the opportunity for the city to have the adjustment for inflation and ancillary costs as they rose. We were flattening the revenue. So I'll turn over to Mr. Knudsen to answer some of those questions as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor Sheehy. I think the overarching message here is that we've tried to present a budget, and we've talked a lot about positional analysis. We talked about some of these projects. Jill's talked about, and you can see in the budget books as well too, is that we're been dealing with for a number of years with a structural deficit. Our ongoing revenues do not match up with our ongoing expenses, and we've worked hard the last couple of years to make some decisions to try to get that to work as best we can. And we're also dealing with an expectation that we have from our residents. We're told that we need to increase the levels of services for our residents. We need to pick up the trash more in the parks. We need to provide more officers on the street. We have to make sure we're compensating our employees at a market rate. We need to increase street sweeping. We need better roads. We need all these things that impacts all the different departments all throughout the organization. And so that's what we're hearing in terms of what we need to do more so. And in the meantime, we're having it's a challenge to make sure we go through a budget process where we're identifying the needs and our ability to provide services to the community based on the resources that we have. And it's these are really tough conversations. So not just with one or two departments. This is across the board. And remember, we have support services. For one department to function, we need the IT infrastructure, the HR infrastructure. We need to have payroll and pay the bills and up and down the organization. So all the things have a ripple effect throughout the organization. So right now, the city is placed in a situation where we're hearing two messages right now coming from the community. And this is, just the public at large, not anybody in particular, but the public at large, is we want more city services and we don't want to pay any increases in tax. So what we're trying to do from a city staff perspective is thread that needle and try to identify some revenues that would be least impactful. And I guess in my mind, my measure is to that working family that's out there, and so we identify that commercial lease tax. We can go through and identify that sales tax numbers and so forth. Our property tax rate is low. It's 68 cents. Compare that to the countywide property tax, which is, I believe, $1.90 something. So you're looking at nearly 3 times the property tax that's paid to the county than that's paid to the city if you're at Lake Havasu City resident. 7% of, on average, it's a give or take, some less, some more. On average, 7% of your property tax bill that we all pay as property owners goes to Lake Havasu City. The other 93% goes to other entities. So just a big round topic in terms of where we're at with revenues and what we hear from staff, from the community at large, and the direction that we're giving and the direction we're giving throughout this meeting is do more. So we're trying to put together a plan that allows us to do that, but we have to use the dollars wisely. And we're not doing our job if we don't come and at least raise some of the conversations, and appreciate the conversations we had with staff and the council at the February planning session. And we identified the fact that, hey, we need to make sure that we're in a place to at least look at additional revenues so that we can accomplish some of the things that we're charged with. So open to any and all conversations how this goes. And then speak real quickly too, we talk about the fact that we hear the other sentiment we hear from the community is, well, just cut all the fat and then you'll have all the dollars you need to do all these other things. Trust me. And if you talk to any of the department heads or anybody that's involved in that budget process, we go through that process very closely. And it's not just one time a year, it's ongoing conversations that occur to say, how can we do better, do more with less? How can we be more efficient? How can we improve services, of course? But there's always an eye towards how can we use these dollars to put to better serve the public in another area. So those conversations are always ongoing. But I just want to kind of put that sentiment out there because we do hear that third conversation. So just that's kind of the big picture of where we're at. We're trying to do the best we can given the resources we have. That's why I talked about in the beginning that the budget is a planning document where this is how we plan to spend the money over the course of the next 12 months, the next fiscal year. And it's a planning document based on priorities. So we're going to have, 200 items that we want to do in the budget, but we only have enough money to pay for 112 of those things. So how do you make that happen? And so that's what this represents here. So staff will be coming with a recommendation to council for that commercial lease tax. We'll see that in the next month. And again, that the implementation won't be for July 1st, but it'll be for at the end of the fiscal year, maybe into the May timeframe, so that we can make sure that we're in a good place as a community, and with the health of our small businesses are out there. And again, that commercial lease tax, city looks at a large percentage of those revenues will be coming from the storage units that are in the community. So I rambled, just trying to give a kind of a big picture observation there, Mayor, and I appreciate all the conversations and engagement from you, Mr. Mayor, and as well as council. So thank you.
Yeah, do any other members of the council have any other comments?
I have one more. I just think it's good to point out to the public that doesn't really understand always how the council works, that this is how we make decisions. This is the first time that since the retreat where all 7 of us have been in a virtual meeting to discuss this. We don't meet outside. We don't have meetings. We don't discuss this out. We're not allowed to with open meeting law. So this is the first time where we get to have it presented to the council as a whole. And I get to, get an idea of what Councilmember McCoy feels about it, or what Councilmember Grote or Lynn feels about it. So, and then of course it gives that direction back to the city staff that, okay, well, a majority of the council feels this direction. So then they have direction that they can then go back and look at it. So I think that sometimes that people miss is of how we operate the city, that the city manager operates on a day-to-day basis. I mean, people think that, Cal sits at the desk writing checks as they come in and do this, do that, or, people like, why don't you guys get together and change that? I'm like, well, we don't have a meeting for another 2 weeks. And if it's not on the agenda, we don't just, so I think it's good for people to understand how the council truly works. This is exactly, we get presented it all at the same time. We discuss it, but this is how we work. So I think it's just a good understanding for people out there. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dolan. Any other comments or thoughts? Yeah, Councilmember Grote.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank you, Councilor Dolan, for pointing that out. It's amazing. People think when you're elected to city council, you have all this power, when in reality you don't, but you can shape and you can influence. And what I think I heard here today, because we don't really make huge changes in these budgets when we get to this point, but we do have options. And what I think I heard from the majority of the council members, or at least everybody that I can recall here and speak about it, is that we really do need to look after our people. And I think, there are some practicalities and impracticalities associated with that, but at the very least, I think we should get our public safety personnel sorted for the July 1st, because if we were to lose across fire and police, let's say 10 people, that opportunity cost would exceed the amount of money that we spent to keep those personnel on our staff. We never look at that. That doesn't wind up in your P&L, but that is a fact. And we've seen that, and the police chief gave us some good information. And we know this has been happening across the board in public safety. And that's, 911, life and death, that matters. Doesn't mean personnel are any more important or less important than anybody else. We love everybody. But at this point, the amount of money in sunk cost or opportunity cost and the hollowing out of expertise to the city is very dangerous. So I think I heard most of the people say, we want that option sorted for July 1st, and then we can look at the Plan B options and so on and so forth. Everybody's going to get something here, and we're going to do the best we can. But I think I heard that's an urgency.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts that we want to share? So if we could just get consensus again that, like I said, this is our last work session before the tentative budget is moving forward. So this budget is dependent on knowing what the revenues are going to be. again, Jess and his team have put together a lot of different options so that we can take advantage of grant funding and the like. But this commercial lease tax with a late in the fiscal year implementation was the direction of the council at the planning session. Is that still where we're at? Because that will need to be considered in this final document we'll see on June 8th. So I'm looking at shaking of heads, it seems. Enough that we have consensus. Okay. So when we come back on June 8th, we'll see what that looks like for us. Mr. Knutz, is there anything else you need from council as far as direction to present the final budget in June?
No, sir. Appreciate the conversations.
All right. Are there any closing comments from any members of the council? All right. Again, I'll just, oh yeah, Councilmember Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank everybody on the city administration, staff, and the members of council. It's a lot of work on everybody's behalf, and stay safe, and thank you for everything you do.
All right, thank you. Just in closing, again, thank you again to all of the city staff for all of the work. Also, a big thank you to our citizens. I know these are odd times, and generally this room would have many of you sitting in here, and we appreciate your active involvement, although it's remote and through other processes. We do want to hear from you, so please be sure to share your thoughts and comments with us as a council. There's many opportunities to do so. You can do it via email to each of us individually, or at our next council meeting, you can send comments into the clerk. Again, that's the city clerk at the email address of cityclerk@lhcaz.gov. You are one of the most important pieces of this whole puzzle, and so we definitely want to hear what you have to say. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, Vice Mayor Lane made the motion, and Councilmember Dolan second. Be kind to everyone, and thank you for everything. We are adjourned.
Thank you.